Hey, this is Danny Brown with The Deal. Thank you for joining us on this special edition, State of the Real Estate Market. I have four major influential players in the world of real estate. Kirsh Rising, who is the CEO of Rising Realty and owns 5 million square feet of office space in LA and Denver and through the Western United States. Jim Travers, a principal at Cressa Realty. Jim is the godfather of tenant rep and office deals, has done some of the biggest deals on planet Earth over the last 40, 50 years. Jay Luchs of Newmark is a retail broker, probably the most successful retail broker in the country, all over Rodeo Drive. He's broken records up and down the street, and he's been pushing a lot of cool up-and-coming brands. And then Andrew Kirsh, co-founder of Skylar Kirsh, a transactional real estate attorney who's got his hands in multifamily office, a lot of stuff. So you couldn't find four more knowledgeable, experienced guys in the trenches to give us the reality and breakdown of what's happening. As of this moment, Friday, we still don't have a president. We thought we'd have a president elected today, but the votes still aren't counted. So keep that in mind. And they're giving us the true breakdown of what they've been seeing in COVID and how it's really impacted the commercial market in a negative way. And tenants haven't been paying rent and everything's up in the air. So as much as the residential markets have been active and bullish and strong, I really wanted to present what's happening on the institutional side and the investment side, the commercial side, so you can see that it's a different world and things are shaking up, and it's going to be a while before we get through this mess. So thanks for tuning in. You can always find me on thedealpod.com, at thedealpod on Instagram, or at Danny Brown LA on Instagram. Thanks for joining. Please subscribe to our podcast, The Deal with Danny Brown. Leave us a 5-star review if you like what you hear. You can always find us also on YouTube if you want to see the video. It's also The Deal with Danny Brown on YouTube. Appreciate it. Enjoy this as much as I did. It's just really informative. School is in session for real. See you soon. This is a special edition of my The Deal with Danny Brown. It's a state of the market, real estate market. I have 4 incredible speakers, panelists, all major players in the real estate business. Unfortunately, Jim Travers, who's the 4th, having some technical difficulties. But really wanted to get everyone's take on what's going on. I was hoping that we'd have a president elected right now, but as we speak, on Friday afternoon, I think Biden has like 253 electoral votes and Trump has 250. So there is no president. So we don't have that resolved. But I really wanted to get a take of what you guys were seeing the last quarter or two leading into the election, and what are you seeing and projecting the next quarter or two to be. So that's the overview. I want to do a quick intro for those that don't know the panelists. We have Kirsh Rising, who's the CEO of Rising Realty Partners. He is an owner-operator of about 5 million square feet of office space downtown LA. He's really in the middle of what's happening with landlords, tenants, so he's going to give us some perspective on that. Oh, Jim, did you make it on the call? I think I see Jim's phone.
Yes. Do you see me? Hear me?
We can't see your pretty face, Jim, but we're happy to have you. So Jim Travers just
Thank you very
joined
much,
us.
Danny.
So Jim Travers is with Cressa. He's a principal at Cressa. He is a specialist in tenant rep, has done some of the biggest, most complicated office deals in the history of man. So welcome, Jim. Glad to have you. Jay Luchs with Newmark. Jay Luchs is arguably the most successful retail broker in the U.S., focusing on a lot of high-end luxury brands, but also a lot of startup brands. He's very involved with launching and building brands from a business standpoint. So he's going to have a really good perspective on how these businesses are doing and who's struggling, who's not, and what's happening next. And then finally, I have my good buddy Andrew Kirsh from Skylar Kirsh, the co-founder, real estate transactional attorney. He's got a 30,000 square foot view of all these different sectors because he's involved with multifamily, office, retail, residential, all of it. So that's the overview, and I'm going to let you guys open it up. I'm going to start with Kirsh. Why don't you give us a breakdown of what's going on in the world of office landlords and what it was looking like the last couple months here and what it's going to be forward. Now, I spoke to you at the beginning of the pandemic, and what you had said to me, which was really interesting at that time, was, look, it's basically the government is going to underwrite the second quarter of the year. They're going to pay with PPP loans. They're going to bail everyone out. And I don't think you or me or anyone else on this call or anywhere else figured we'd be still here 8 months later. So there's your intro, Chris. You could take it from here. And if any of you panelists want to jump in, feel free, because I know you guys all know each other well as well. But Chris, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, I think things are they're tough right now, real tough. I mean, outside of Jim, who's still working like it's 1980 and hustling and trying to bring deals around, there aren't that many tours. I think we went from averaging about 10 to 15 tours a week across our portfolio to, we're lucky if we get one. So I think we're still in the middle of a pandemic. The numbers are just terrible. I mean, what was that, 120,000 cases yesterday. And I think that's just, people are scared. Some people are scared. Large companies are scared. They're scared about the liability of having people come into work. So until we get our hands around the pandemic where you get some sort of normalcy, I think office is in real deep trouble. Now, long term, this Zoom world hasn't been that effective for my company and for our team. I think it's a nice thing to have to, be a part of your day and all, but the idea that we're going to spend all of our lives behind little cameras and talking this way, I just don't buy it. But we still got to get from here to there. And so we're in the middle of a pandemic. We are most certainly in a recession. I do see that numbers look better, and that's all great, but not as it relates to office and, an office and hotel for sure. So I'm pretty negative. I think 2021 is going to be where you see a lot of people have to give back the keys on office, because it takes about 9-12 months to work out something with a lender or a servicer. So my suspicion is by June of next year, you'll start to see a lot of good buying opportunities, and probably take us a year or two to normalize into something where a CEO is going to want to make a decision. And I think there's going to be a lot of young CEOs. The average age of a CEO is 51. CFO is 48. I think there's a lot of them out there who are going to say, let's see what we can do if we had half the office space. And I don't think that in the long term, that's going to be a great strategy, but I think nobody's making long-term decisions. And so in the short term, if we get some connection via Zoom and we can give back some of our liability, they'll do it. So sorry, I'm not more upbeat, but I'm pretty negative on where the office market is going to be through the next 12 months or so.
Well, that's fine to be negative. We just want to hear the reality. Are you seeing yet distressed opportunities because of all this negativity, or are we not there yet?
They're coming. They're out there. We all have to sometimes look ourselves in the mirror and recognize where the market is, and people aren't quite there yet and hoping for some miracles. I think there's a real chance we're going to have some sort of stimulus now that the election's over. It probably won't be the $4 trillion or whatever that the Democrats wanted, but it won't be $500 million that the Republican senators want. It'll be somewhere in between. And I think that'll help, and I think that's important. So, but I would say if we can get people to start coming back to work, it really frustrates me when I see some of the big service firms, real estate service firms, and some of the big architecture firms saying to their people, well, we're not going to come back till next June. I mean, we're all in the real estate business. At some point, we got to figure out a way to do this. I'm not advocating that anybody does anything that isn't per the protocols and all, but we got to figure out a way to get kids back to school and people back to work.
Sure. So, Jim Travers, I want to jump over to you really quick, because you have a lot of similar synergies with Chris in terms of representing tenants. What is happening in the world of office tenants over the last 6 months? Is it a constant renegotiation of office rents? Are people reconfiguring, shrinking their footprints? Why don't you speak to that to tag on to what Chris was saying?
Yes, I think Chris hit the nail on the head. So on the bigger companies, they're taking the CFO and the CEOs and the board of directors are taking a very, very hard look of all their employees. And are they producing and are not producing? If they're not producing, we got to let them go and start moving on. At the same time, if they are producing, so if the 4 of us on the phone, 5 of us on the phone were working for IBM and we would be producing, so now the issue is, do I really need to have Chris and Jim Travers coming in with everyone else, Andrew and my buddy Jay, every single day, 5 days a week. Now the issue, maybe you should have Andrew and Jay come in Monday, Tuesday only, clean the offices on Wednesday, and have Chris and I come in Thursday and Friday. So I see a lot of cutback in office space now, maybe 25 to 30%, because of Zoom and the technology. And now that the managers are letting their employees work at home and seeing they can function with the dogs and the kids and all the other nonsense that happens at home, there's going to be a big shift. And it is very, very concerning, but it is happening as we speak. Most of the leases at Douglas Emmett, which is the largest landlord on the west side, I believe all their deals now, except for a few, are a year or two. Everyone's going short. Everyone wants to go through the process here, not commit long term, and just see what happens in the next 24 months. So it's a very, very different time. And it's different than 2008 because business was still going on. Now everything is closed. I was out touring today in a couple of Chris's buildings, and we all know, maybe 10% of the whole entire complex is occupying space today. It's a very, 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 very strange situation. And hopefully July is what I'm hearing of next year is when people will come back to work, which is a very long time from now. So we're all stuck in the mud. No question about it.
So to you and Chris, and maybe Chris, you have more of the landlord standpoint, but what percentage of tenants have either stopped paying rent or have renegotiated rents or are asking for reprieves? What has that been looking like?
Well, I mean, fortunately, most of our tenants are paying rent. I think our rate is somewhere around 94, 95%. The people who have just gotten destroyed have been the small restaurants that service office workers. There's just really no hope. The gym, that kind of thing, because legally they really can't be open, or if they're open, there's just not the clientele. I would say that what's jumped out is owning buildings with credit tenants matters. And the buildings, the projects where we don't have credit tenants, we've had to work really hard to try to help people, but there's not much you can do if their individual business just goes away. So, and I'd say the other thing is owning buildings that have government tenants, not a bad thing either. They seem to pay their rent every month. But for the most part, across our portfolio, people have paid rent, but we're not immune. And we've got, unfortunately, for sure, one project where we're just having to have some very serious discussions with the lender about where we see the world. Because if I thought it was going to change in 3 to 6 months, we wouldn't be having some early discussions with lenders. But since I don't think it's going to change for minimum of 12 and more like 24 months, I think you gotta get in the boat with them and be real honest about where you see things going. I cannot see a CEO or CFO committing to anything in the short term, and that's tough.
So let me now flip this over to Jay Luchs, because you're talking about smaller tenants, restaurant tenants, retail tenants. So Jay, this is what you do all day, every day. You have big institutional brands, you have small startup brands. What is going on? Obviously, retail, a bomb went off for retail because no one could go to restaurants and no one could go to these places. So talk to us about what's been going on in the retail world. Are people going out of business? Are people renegotiating leases? Is there a new business model that's happening now with partnerships between tenants and landlords? Take it wherever you want. I know there's a lot of ground to cover.
How are you? And you can hear me, right?
I can hear you good, and you're very, very handsome, Jay. Very
Thank
handsome.
you, Danny.
But
So
not as handsome as Jim Travers, but you're close.
Well, no one is that handsome.
No.
But thank you, and thanks to all the people that are spending your time listening to us today. We appreciate it. And Danny, thanks for doing these. I know it takes up a lot of time, and I think it's really valuable. I would say, to answer your question, since March, I think there was a week in March where the NBA announced no fans. And I think at that point, a lot of people realized like something's real. Something just happened that's not just a 2-week stay in your place. And literally from around that time, because I remember that announcement, everything just started happening where I must have gotten 150 calls from tenants from New York, from around the country, from LA, locals and nationals. I mean, huge national names and international names, from Rodeo Drive to the hair salons. I mean, multiple people that own salons and an ice cream shop and whatever it is. And all of them needed help. It was almost like needed counseling, but this was March. So we didn't know what we now know. But even in March, or whether it's today or back then, you couldn't learn this in college. You couldn't learn this in 2019. You couldn't learn this if you've been in the business for 25 years. You're learning on the job right now as a broker. And a lot of this has to do with the sensitivity and the human nature side, because negotiating is a combination of things, like all of you know who are watching and on the other panelists, that there are things to worry about, like rent and TI money and all the things that we look at on a piece of paper. But there's another element to a transaction, and that's ownership and personality and ego. And when you upset people, that is another check, to check off on a box. Like, if a landlord's not open to helping, that's a problem. And if a tenant on the other end takes advantage and they're making, if it was Amazon and they're making billions of dollars and they're asking for things, it's different than if it's the salon who has no savings and can't make it. So a lot of landlords have also looked at it like, well, show me your financial statement and let me see that you're really hurting. So it's a combination of things. But I would say 85%, if I had to make it up, of the real life situations are tenants who are really, really hurting and cannot get to that next place. So back in March, there was a mall, probably the Irvine Company's Fashion Island, or one of the malls, that said, we're going to give 3 months of deferral in 2021. And that's how we're going to solve the problem. And all of a sudden, tenants were calling and they wanted free rent, not deferral of rent. But at that time, everyone was basing it on 3 months. People thought that 2 weeks later, we were going to go back and life would be normal again, and there we'd be. I remember telling people, and it might even be documented on one of my, I've done a few of these, like 5 or so since March, where I record my own, what I'm seeing on my Instagrams. I would say, I remember thinking it's got to at least be 6 months, but I wouldn't have guessed that it would need to be a year or two. It probably will end up being that a tenant needs a year worth, if you're in retail, like a year worth of free rent to be in great shape or decent shape. It's not going to happen. I mean, the landlords are going to say, what also makes sense, that they have a bank to pay and that it's not their fault that COVID happened either. So the problem is, there isn't like the big brother that can just give. I know there's been all sorts of stimulus packages, but I'm talking about someone that says, don't worry, like Steve Mnuchin, everyone, don't worry. Don't pay the bank. Don't pay your landlord. It's fine. I mean, unfortunately, we can't just have had that, and it's complicated. So what that means is a lot of tenants, and we mentioned restaurants and others, whether you're at the highest level or not, but especially the small tenants, you could be done. And you've seen that. I mean, go look up on the news, tenants that are bankrupt because of COVID, and you'll find many. Like Brooks Brothers is not, it's not as popular today because it's men's suits isn't what it was back in the day. But as an example, it's a 250-year-old company that's bankrupt. There are so many other examples. What I think is the most sad is, I'm just going to talk about Los Angeles, which is our town. You have a lot of little stores. You have a lot of little spaces. There was never a rule that every space had to be filled. And even in the best of times in 2017, 18, there were multiple offers on spaces. It was craziness. Even then, not every space was full. And even then, if there were 2 vacancies on a street, people would say, what's the problem? But again, there was never a book written that said every space has to be full. So a lot of businesses to fill it up. So to get to the end of this, my point is, we're in a weird place. I share with what Jim and Chris said. I guess I would just say it's technically really bad times, but yet there have been a few signs of positive activity that give me hope. I have recently had a few deals turn into 10-year terms with an option. I haven't seen a normal deal in 6 months. I do think after the election, we're going to start seeing the brands, office tenants too, but for me, retail brands that believe in themselves for 10 or 20 years that are going to start making offers because they need to secure their space and time. If they wait too long and next year some positive news happens, they're going to be priced out again. So they need to start to think about their future. And it's going to start happening where, yeah, they may want percentage rent. Yeah, they may want TIs, but it's going to be time soon that they make long-term offers again. Sorry for the long-winded response, but that's pretty much it.
That was a lot to say, Jay. So look, retail has been in an evolution and an acceleration transition period with the Amazon effect for the last 5 years, and each year it's compounded and accelerated and changed retail in general. It seems, and I don't know if you may have said this in one of your Instagram talks, but I've talked to a few others, and Andrew Kirsh, I'd love for you to jump in on this. Are you seeing now that the future of retail is that the tenants have to partner with the landlords, and the landlords have to, rather than just taking traditional rent, be involved with gross receipts and gross income, because there's just no way for these brands to flourish if they're paying these high rents and with what we're seeing? Is that a trend? Is that where things are heading?
Andrew, do you want to respond to that? I could certainly do it, but Andrew, do you want to? The answer is that tenants want that, but not all landlords can do it. Landlords do have to pay their banks. So I had a big offer on Sunset Boulevard at percentage rent only from I think a tenant that I told the landlord, like, you're crazy not to take. But the landlord could not take them. It's not just they're so great of a tenant. If it was Apple, I mean, who wouldn't take Apple? But what if it was Apple at percentage rent only? Does your bank on that? But not every tenant's going to be Apple. And the trend right now is TIs, 2 years plus an option, 1 year plus an option, percentage rent only for a year or two plus an option. I did a deal for Lululemon on Abbot Kinney, 1 year with a 5-year option. They're going to take their option. They're going to do great. They're already doing well. I mean, that was a deal done in the middle of COVID. But with that said, I've done 5 or 6 deals since COVID. Usually I do 50 or 100, but 5 or 6 in 6 months that were 7 or 10 years long. But there are some.
Yeah. So wow. Andrew Kirsh, you're involved with a lot of different sectors. You're seeing office, multifamily, retail, this, that. You're involved with transactions. So we're hearing a lot of negative trends, and of course we're in the middle of this pandemic. But I'd be curious from your view, because you're in the middle of a lot of transactions. Are transactions getting done? Are you seeing a robust amount of transactions? I know from the residential side, other than the ultra over 15 million high end, there's been a lot of velocity and a lot of transactions happening. But I'd love for you to kind of talk about that, what you're seeing across different verticals within real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Danny. So the first 3 months of COVID, March through May, transactions went to a grinding halt. It was more just triage. And buyers and sellers were duking it out with respect to deposits and non-refundable deposits. And since June 1st, and especially now as we're in the fourth quarter, it is as active as I've ever seen the purchase and sale market. It's crazy. Multifamily, industrial. We even closed an office deal, a multi-tenant office deal on the west side of LA with one of Jay's colleagues today. We've done office eastern side of San Gabriel Valley a couple of weeks ago, a large industrial portfolio we're working on. And we're talking about both within Southern California and outside of California. But what I don't understand is how my clients are evaluating these deals on the buy side when Chris and Jim and Jay have talked for the last 30 minutes of how tough leasing is. And if I look at my whiteboard here, where I break it down to purchase and sale transactions, financings, and leases, and I usually have a good set of each, I haven't done one new office or retail lease since COVID started. Not one. I've done forbearance agreements, I've done modifications, I've done lease terminations, but not one new lease. And that just speaks volumes. So the fact that we are so active in acquisitions tells me that the clients and the market believes in the long-term growth of each of these asset classes. And if I could speak to one other thing that I think Jay was touching upon, and Chris as well, we basically have an unfair system right now in that tenants are getting relief from certain jurisdictions, whether you're a multi-family tenant or whether you're an office tenant or retail tenant. If you fall within a certain category, you can get automatic deferral of rent. But the landlords, unless they signed up for a Fannie Freddie multifamily program where they promise not to evict, other than those types of landlords, no other landlord's getting relief from their lenders, at least from a government perspective. And it just doesn't work, where the government allows tenants not to pay, but is requiring landlords to pay their debt service. And so at some point, as Chris said, we haven't really seen a massive flood of distress come to the market. I've seen a little bit in hotel, but not like the numbers that I think people were expecting. Perhaps in 2021, that's going to happen because the landlords are not going to be able to hang on, and the lenders, I think, aren't going to be patient anymore.
But are the deals you're doing, are they getting, as a landlord, getting, or the sellers getting the market price, or are you seeing a big discount? And that's why you're having so many deals going through, Andrew. What
yeah,
are
it's a good question, Jim. I'm not seeing the discounts, and certainly not.
You're not seeing discounts.
No.
No.
Yeah, we're certainly not.
We're
not seeing any discounts
on the office market a little bit. Haven't done really retail acquisitions or sales. A little bit of office, a lot of industrial, a lot of multifamily. So definitely in those two asset classes, it's probably now has exceeded pre-COVID pricing.
Yeah. Jay, have you seen that on the retail side as well? Are you seeing that even though we're having all these issues with rents, that pricing is still back to peak or even beyond peak levels?
Well, not beyond peak levels by any means, but what Andrew was saying was an interesting point, that it does show the long-term belief that we're going to be okay. So what I'm getting from my clients that have dry powder and want to go buy everything, because there are some, it definitely relates to, they want to take into consideration COVID. So I don't tell my clients to plug in numbers where we're back in 2 years. I mean, for me, my advice to my clients is if we're going to go buy a portfolio or a building, is we are going to go down. Jim mentioned, could it be 25 or 30%? I mean, really, maybe you go down 30% and you make an offer and you negotiate, but at least you're in a negotiation. And if you love the asset and you really believe in it, we know how to make deals out there, and we'll figure it out. And there's not as much distress, like you were saying. I'm not seeing that much available. I'm involved with a big sale right now and a small sale, and that's it. The big one will surprise people.
Is that commercial, Jay? That's commercial, retail, or office?
Retail only, high end, similar pricing to almost like market pre-COVID in this case. But if the asset is trophy and so special, you might get a pre-COVID price, whatever the end date is. What's going to scare me a little bit, and I hope that we get through it okay, if all these tenants, many of whom are just sitting there because they know they can't be kicked out and are not paying rent, even if some of these landlords don't have a backup tenant, imagine the anger that they have when they can evict and they do evict because of ego. They're mad or whatever the reason. So what I do think is going to happen the day you're allowed to evict is you're going to see vacancy, a lot of it. So there's going to be a freak out period where you look around and you go, it's not just for lease signs, it's vacancy. And it's going to take some time to refill those and for the market to get healthy again. Now, in each area where there's devastation and vacancy, one really cool brand shows up and that will reignite a street. But we haven't even taken into consideration that all these tenants, you don't know who's paying rent, who's not, but the tenants who aren't paying are allowed to sit in a space right now. And we all get it. They're trying to squeeze out their last sales that they can squeeze out. But there's a point where sophisticated landlords that are angry are going to kick them all out.
Yeah, so in a sense, what you guys are all saying is that we're on bot time. A lot of the tenants that are not healthy or financially sound are on bot time. They're able to sit there, and it can't go on forever. Is there a timeline at this point? Has there been a timeline of?
I think Jay said March 31st with Governor Newsom, but I think it might be pushed back. But what Jay's saying on one of my clients as a subtenant that's raising capital for their tech company, and they have probably $4 to $8 million in the bank, and they're not paying rent, and they're under the basis. So as Jay is saying, we're very frustrated, don't know what to do. They don't come to the table, and we can't evict them, and it's very, very frustrating, and it's wrong. We know they have the money. We know they have the money, and they're just hiding under the skirts of this whole situation. And it's terrible. The time has come and this should be repealed, but March is a long way away. I mean, obviously it's 5 months, but it's a problem.
And it goes both ways. Some of the tenants are truly hurting, but others aren't. And regardless of the truth or not, there is just going to be a day, and it's COVID related.
Yeah.
I mean, if COVID goes for another year, I mean, it's going to keep getting pushed, but there will be a day in 21 where that will be over and will be allowed to evict, and you're going to start seeing evictions everywhere.
So, Chris, back to you. You know, great opportunities come at challenging times, as we know, and you and Jim and everyone on this call have seen a lot of markets and have seen a lot of different market crashes and market opportunities. I gotta think, being an optimist and being in this game, that there's going to be some opportunities at some point. What is your take on that? And obviously, no one can read the future, and this could get pushed out another year or two. But you being an office operator and owner, do you feel like at some point soon you're going to be stepping on the gas, looking to increase your footprint and try to take advantage of whatever opportunities may come? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I am. Sorry. There's always a price per pound where you just start to feel like, hey, if I could get it at $100 a foot, or you can start to talk yourself into it. But here's where I really have some issues about whether you can do this. If you can buy it all cash, fine. But if you're going to come in with a lender and you've got to prove up what lease rates are, I can't tell you what a lease rate is in the city of Los Angeles right now. I really can't. And so until we start seeing some markers around lease rates and some sort of this is where the bottom is, I think it's going to be hard. I mean, I do remember very distinctly around 2010 when John Long bought something down in Orange County and Main Street, and everybody said, "Oh my God, you're trying to catch a falling knife. It's just ridiculous." But when you look back at it, he bought Main Plaza. I think it was Main Plaza in Irvine at a price per pound that was so attractive. He ended up making good money on it. So that's coming at some point. And the other thing is, while we do own most of our portfolio in Southern California, we also own in Denver. We're very active looking in Texas and in Las Vegas. COVID is really bad in those places, but people are going into the office. It's a little different than here. So I think we'll have some great buying opportunities. I was on a panel with Ethan Penner recently, and Ethan was saying he thinks there'll be better buying opportunities this time around than in the GFC. He equated it a lot to where we were in the early 90s in terms of buying opportunities. So, but can't evict anybody. Nobody's signing a lease. People are legitimately scared. I think people are just going to do nothing as long as they can. So
Yeah. So
I'm
Jim,
negative on office in the short term. Not in the long term. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback, and there's going to be a lot of young people who say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life working from Zoom. I want to go be in the room where things are happening. But in the short term, I just think it's tough.
Jim, you may have touched on this, but have you seen office rates, prime office, West Side rates drop, or is it just not enough deals happening to really put your finger on it? What are you seeing right
basically,
now?
obviously, Disney just gave notice that they're vacating 250,000 square feet in Fox Plaza. The rent went from $750 to $550 overnight. You got CAA that's not going to be renewing supposedly on the 330,000 square feet that expires July of 22. That's an $8 building, and we'll see how all that works out. There's a lot of new construction being built on the west side. Lumen's building 5. We're doing a Silverberg complex. It's a 550,000 per building. Been there 3 or 4 times. It's a beautiful complex, a lot of space. But that's coming on. You had Heinz building on the Thomas Cadillac space, a 200,000 square foot multi-use development, retail, residential, and obviously office. That is coming also in 22. You got Drew Planting bought the Macy's site next to Google. That's 200,000 square feet plus or minus. So you got Fox giving up their space in Playa Vista. It's over 400,000 square feet. The subleasing market every day is coming on with more and more tenants coming on. So I'm very involved in New York City. It's going to be the bloodbath. A bloodbath. When it happens in New York City, kind of flows here west here. So it could be 22 is going to be a fascinating time to see the landlords that are developing these buildings and having huge vacant space. Are they going to hold to their rental rates? And the odds are they can't if they have deals coming in, as Chris said, credit tenants that's going to pay the rent, whether COVID or not COVID. They're going to have to make an adjustment. It's going to have to be a rethinking of everything's going up 4% these past 6-7 years. It's been amazing. The rents have creeped up. I mean, Century City now is a $5 number minimum. And there were about 28 floors available at Century City, not 36 months ago. Now there may be, without the CAA stuff and Disney, maybe 6 or 7. So it's going to be a big change, and I can't wait.
You can't wait to take advantage to get some good tenant deals. So
now, Jim, we all know you make more money when the rent's higher. So let's keep working with us here, man.
Okay, I'll be happy to, Chris.
So Andrew and Jan, I'd also like you to jump in on what your big deep pocket institutional clients and family offices are thinking about right now, and are they on the sidelines with powder ready to go? It seems like everyone's just been waiting and waiting and waiting, and now it seems like it's going to be more of a waiting game because of what's happening with COVID.
Yeah, there's not as much happening as you would think. There's a lot of money out there, but they can't spend it on stupid purchases, and there's not a lot to sell right now. So you've got money.
What's going on Rodeo Drive, Jay? What's happening in Rodeo? That's your territory.
There could be something very interesting happening there next week. I'm involved with something there that'll be interesting. What's that?
I'm saying, as far as the rents coming down or a new deal taking place.
Well, in terms of actual
your business, but
so in terms of rent, there isn't enough happening to change rent one way or the other. What's the deal with Rodeo Drive is you have tenants who aren't leaving unless it's one or two of the old brands that are leaving actually right now that don't belong. But the highest end luxury brands in the world are there. A couple of them are doing massive renovations. Chanel is doing one. Another brand will be doing one soon that I represent. And the Cheval Blanc Hotel is under construction, and well, not yet. Hopefully will be soon. But there could be a lot of really positive activity in the next 3 years on Rodeo Drive, to where 4 years from now, which sounds like a long time away, but in 4 years, Cheval Blanc could be open with 150 feet of frontage. Chanel in 2 years will be open with 100 feet of frontage, and other things are happening. The Luchs Hotel is for sale. So Rodeo Drive in the end, I think, will be incredibly strong, and it will be as good as it's ever been. Imagine LVMH, Chanel, Hermes, and maybe one or two others, Cartier bought their building, all buying their buildings. What does that mean? It means they're not going anywhere. And the fact that they're renovating, what does that mean? That they want to be current and big and offer flagship product for all their customers worldwide and local. It's an investment. So Rodeo Drive, which is a very important street for LA because it's one of the few in the world, and a lot of people come right to it off the airplane, and it's a big deal both for shopping and for tourists. Long term, I think it's going to be better than it's ever been. Short term, nothing's changing because there isn't really, what are they going to do? Negotiate a month or two free rent or deferral? Yes, but it's gone. I mean, they're making money, they're paying rent, and prices are not changing on Rodeo Drive. They're not going down. There's just not a lot for lease, so nothing's changing.
Yeah. And that hotel is the old Brooks Brothers deal. That's that corner.
Yes,
The hotel is being built on.
I sold that building. I had the listing on it, and I also represented LVMH, and we put some deals together. But I was the agent on the sale, and it ended up becoming right for them to build the hotel with. They prior to that were just buying buildings like a lot of other brands buying buildings.
Yeah, guys, anything you want to add? I want to be sensitive of your time. I know it's almost impossible to get all four of you together for this much time. So I obviously really appreciate taking the time and being candid and giving us some real straightforward information from the trenches. But anything, Andrew, anything you want to add, or Chris or Jim, now's the time. And otherwise, we'll wrap it up soon.
That was very good. Thank you, Danny.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sure. That was very interesting on Beverly Hills real estate, Jay. I think that for the short term, people feel like, oh, we can work remotely. We're okay. You can't grow a business though through Zoom. You have to be in person. You know, you have to have those informal water cooler talks. How can you even onboard somebody successfully? I mean, we all run businesses here, and we're also in the real estate business. And I think it's actually a testament to technology that we could get by for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. But I think the long run, and that's why I'm seeing so much activity really across the asset classes, is that this is just a short-term fix. And even if COVID stays longer than people expect, the ability to grow within a company, the ability to be successful as a company will always require face-to-face, in-person communication, both within your company and with the counterparties and your service providers. And Jim, I know you made a living and a career walking door to door in office buildings, and if those security monitors, the electronic security monitors didn't stop you, I know COVID's not going to stop you, and it's just the way human beings.
But Andrew, reality is it is stopping me. One is that the security and the lock of elevators has been a major impact to me personally, and compounded by COVID-19. A lot of companies do not want to have outside visitors coming in. And from my point of view, for the first time since I've been doing this since 1969, I'm not sure I want to go in and start knocking on doors. So me personally, being a foot canvasser my entire career, I'm making a definite adjustments, and it's a major issue for me because that's how I've virtually made all my deals one way or another, is knocking on doors here and hustling. So now I'm trying to get proficient on on LinkedIn and those issues, making telephone calls. So right now, though, from a broker's point of view, my world, I'm not sure about Jay's world, is that reaching people today is extremely difficult because no one's there and no one really wants to discuss office space when they're not really in their office to discuss. So for me personally, Jim Travers, it's a definite major game changer, and you just have to make the adjustments. But for me, it's a major adjustment. I went to see show space yesterday. I'm in the building. I've been trying to reach his law firm for years. I've been calling, stopping by. I stopped by. Of course, the elevator was locked off. So it's a different world being a broker today. I think much more relationships is going to be the way that I can able to get new business, because otherwise the old days of calling up and walking in and pounding is over from a personal perspective. It's quite shocking to the system.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Danny. Yeah, I was going to just offer, I'm negative in the sense that we were riding very high for 10 years and just a rising market helped a lot of us. But here's where I'm positive. We have investors in China, and for the most part, China's back to business as usual. People are not wearing masks. People are traveling. People are going into the office every day. You look at other cities in the United States, that's coming back to varying degrees. I mean, we clearly have some serious problems with where the COVID numbers are, but I do foresee a day when that fear is taken out, that people start to look at how you run and how you grow a business. And
Right.
I just believe in human beings. I believe that human beings want to have interaction. People, want to be, part of a team. And I think that office will have a place, but it's the old adage, you just can't have too much leverage, and you got to be able to get through this period. And, for our part, we're pivoting a bit, not totally, but, we've brought in someone to run an industrial platform. We've got a multifamily platform. We're already in the data business. So we're just going to try to diversify more. But I don't think I have no doubt that office will be extremely important. And if you really look at what the tech companies are doing, as opposed to what they're saying, they're gobbling up space in New York. They're expanding in the Silicon Valley. So the long term, this whole you can work from home forever stuff, I think is just a way to get talent. Because every time you see what Jack Dorsey says or Zuckerberg say, there's always all these caveats like, if your job allows you to work from home, you can. And then the last thing I'd say is you're going to have a whole generation of Gen Z who are just pissed at the world that they were told they had to, couldn't go to high school, missed their prom, couldn't do their college graduation. And I think they're gonna really push for interaction, whether it's office or whether it's at movie theaters and all that. So we got to get through this pandemic, but I think you'll see a lot of things that there'll be changes. I think work hours are going to radically change, and I think dress codes are out the window now. I think some of those things people don't want to go back to, but the office will be a place people come back to eventually.
Yeah, good points. We're humans. We need to connect. We need to interact. We need to work. We need to go to dinner and lunch, retail. Jay, talk to us with your final words on, the importance of retail and interacting and social lives and all that, and where you see this going in the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really important that streets are activated with all that can happen now online, and even malls, which are retail included. That's great for what it is, but communities are made up of kind of small shops and streets and outside the malls. And it's important that when you walk or drive by, you see activation. If you look at many of the streets in LA that became popular that were nothing, there was one restaurant like Alfred Coffee on Melrose Place, and then Melrose Place became something after that, became really popular. And Earth Cafe on Melrose was the only, when that happened, stores wanted to go near it. It wasn't the retail store that got it happening. It was Earth Cafe. And, Craig's Restaurant and Verve and other action down by Maxfield on Melrose. I'm just using 3 street examples, but if you can activate streets and mix in retail with coffee, fitness, and food and that kind of thing, it's really important in the future because no one cares anymore. They don't want to walk on just retail. They can go online. So you need to create something interesting. And the next 10 years it's incredibly crucial that we continue to have some fun things to do that people want to get out and see each other. That's life. So we need to keep it going.
I agree. More of a curated lifestyle experience. So, any last words, Jim, or anyone else? I appreciate you guys spending this much time with us. You guys couldn't have 4 better panelists to break down what's going on in the world, and I know incredibly valuable your time is. I really appreciate the insights and thoughts. But if anyone has any last words, now's your time. Otherwise, I'm going to say good night, and let's see if by the next time we talk, we have a president.
Thanks, Dan.
We'll soon see.
All right,
Thanks, guys. Bye, everybody.
Guys.
Bye,
We'll
Andrew.
talk to
Bye.
you guys soon.
Bye, Jay. Thank you, Chris.
Bye, Jay. Bye-bye.